Welcome to another issue, or episode, I guess, for Dr. James Beckett Sports Card Insights. Been enjoying doing this, especially enjoy the interview aspects. I'm actually here in Chicago. Many of our sponsors are here. In fact, I'm sitting with one of our star sponsors right now, Rob Veras. But before we get to Rob, a little shout out to some of the other sponsors who are 100 yards away. We've also got ComC, we've got Beckett, which includes BGS and BAS. We'll talk a little bit about the Beckett Marketplace today, perhaps, as well as Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, talked to him yesterday or the day before, as well as Panini and Topps and Upper Deck. Saw some of those guys today as well. But in front of me today is my good friend Rob Veras, Burbank Sportscards. It's one of the wonders of the collecting world, and it keeps getting bigger and better. So, Rob, let's go back to the beginning. How did you get started in this hobby? And you've definitely turned it into an industry with your business instincts. But tell us a little bit about your hobby journey.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my grandfather. He was a collector, coins, stamps, and he was the one that got me on the collecting hunt. And that was really, coins and stamps were the big thing for me at first. Trying to find wheat pennies and rolls of pennies and, having the old Whitman folders and pushing the coins in. And those are my first memories of actually collecting something. Baseball cards was something that you did from the ice cream man during the summer, and that was, something that you traded with the friends. But I was much more of a coin and stamp collector early on, and that was growing up back in Boston.
Well, did it skip your dad?
It did skip my dad. My dad's from Hungary, never really had a collecting background. Okay. It skipped a generation. I really got it from my grandfather. And usually it's a father-son thing, but in this case it wasn't.
But your dad is and has been involved in your business.
I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for my father.
He's an amazing guy.
He's a force of nature, that guy. But getting back to as a kid, and what happened was eventually we moved out to California, and I found a coin and stamp shop that I haunted during the summer, and I just loved it. And he offered me a job. And the first job, this was in 1979. I was 12 years old. And the first job was delivering flyers. And he'd give me about 5,000 flyers, and I had to take them home and fold them a certain way. And I was paid a penny for everyone I threw in a car and 2 cents for everything I threw onto a house. And it was a humble.
Is this honor system?
It was honor system, basically, yeah. And, it was, so I found out right away that I need to find apartment complexes, and preferably like really big apartment complexes. That's where the money was. And did that over the summer. And he asked me to come work behind the counter. And it involved, stapling coins into 2x2s, labeling them, and actually dealing with customers. So at a very young age, I had exposure to dealing with adults in the collectibles field, both buying and selling, which was, tremendous. And the big thing I remember was 1980. Again, I was 13 years old, and that was the gold and silver boom when things went absolutely berserk.
Inflation.
And, gold went to 800, silver went to 50. But the thing was the amount of money that was going back and forth in this business. People coming in with their silverware, people coming in with their teeth to crack out the gold fillings, and just the things I learned as a kid. It was like going to college, because there is no school for this business. But I went through a PhD program of being in this at such a young age. And it was huge for me.
Are sports cards in there at some point, or were you just helping the guy with his coins?
Sports cards came about 1981. I basically found my first price guide for sports cards, and maybe it was late 1980. And I was like, oh my God, this whole new world just opened up to me. I'm used to red books and bookmans for stamps, and there's a price guide for cards. And I lost my mind being a sports fanatic. And Don Osborne, the owner, allowed me to put a little baseball card section in there because he really liked me, and he made 20%, and I merchandised everything, and everything was priced, and they would sell the stuff when I was in school. But, after school, Saturdays, summers, I was there, and I was making quite a bit of money.
So you were getting paid by the hour. You just were kind of like subleasing.
I was getting paid.
Or were you getting paid to
I was
help
still
him
making,
in his business?
At that point, I was making like $250 an hour because I was still doing a lot for him. Okay. My little card hustle was a very small part of the business. And
your dad has a real strong work ethic. I know that.
My dad
so is that where that's coming from? Because most kids that are young like that don't look for more work to do. They look for more recreation time. But this was fun probably for you.
It's never been a job. I've been in this 40 years, Jim. I've never worked a day in my life. The work ethic did come from my father. He was a immigrant that was forced out of Hungary in 1956 and came to the country with nothing, no language, no money, and built a very successful business. And I saw how hard he worked, and that nothing came easy. And I was fortunate enough to be in something that I loved. And so putting the work in was never work. 12 hours I never thought of it as 12 hours. I just thought of it as going to work for the day.
And your dad was always approving? I mean, he thought this was a good thing for you to go into?
Yeah, well,
he's very opinionated.
Well, yes, he does have a strong opinion, and he owned a business called Sandval Engineering. Had 140 employees, worked for JPL, worked for LA School Unified, heating, air conditioning, all that stuff. And his dream, just like my dream with my son, was for me to run his business. Okay. And he realized early on that I got his work ethic, but I did not get his skills when it came to doing mechanical contracting. And I already had a passion built for something. And God bless him,
could recognize that.
Not only did he recognize it, but at some point he actually gave me my first loan to put money towards the business and grow it. I took him to a card show, I'm going to say like 1986, 87, and he was behind the counter and he loved it. He loved the interactions. He couldn't believe the money that was going back and forth. And, I was doing it on a 18-year-old shoestring budget, and he saw a scale, and he's always been my biggest supporter.
But there weren't many people making a full-time living off the hobby, off cards. This was back in the 70s for sure, and even in the 80s. And
yeah.
There were some side gig people.
It was. And for me too, I was in school. I was in college. I dropped out of college in 86. And from that point forward, I was fully vested and, doing a tremendous amount of business and just loved the business.
You're known for your organizational skills of having so many cards and actually knowing where they are and knowing how to price them. Did you bring that immediately to, as you got started in this? Were you always really well organized and looking for structure and all that? Because it was chaos back in those days. It was in most stores.
It was chaos, but I learned early on that a certain someone in Dallas had mastered the chaos and gotten their arms around it. And we modeled a lot of what we did based on Beckett's, principles, philosophies, and how their data all broke down. And the real telling point was, I always tell the story, is my mother started working with me. As soon as I bought the business, it was in 89, I was 22. And she worked in there, she loved it, but the key was she wanted to be useful. And someone would call on the phone, do you have such and such? She actually made it mandatory. And so she pushed me quite a bit to make it where she could access the cards quickly and give a price over the phone. And so that was the real origin of our organization was, if my mother can figure it out, any employee I bring on board should be able to figure it out.
Okay. Well, that's when people call and ask you that now and they say, do you have a certain card? Your answer is just yes, right?
The answer usually is yes. And the answer is just...
The short answer is yes.
The short answer is...
You have 43 million cards?
We have 43 million cards that are database. We have more.
So it's multiple copies. It's not 43 distinct.
We go deep. We got 2.55 million unique listings on both our website as well as eBay. So that pretty much, it dwarfs anything. We like to be
very impressive.
It's, the bottom line is you don't have to be the cheapest all the time, but you do need to have the selection, but not only the selection, it needs to be fresh, and it needs to be fresh daily. And you need to have that selection to get people to free shipping. People want free shipping. And in this world.
Your store started out as a store.
Yeah.
And then at some point it went to being more of like an office showroom or a kind of a
hybrid.
Hybrid, and now it's moving back more to being a store, or equal parts.
It's been a strange journey. I mean, retail I grew up in, I couldn't imagine anything different because there wasn't anything different. Everything was face-to-face interaction. And
were you ahead of the curve? I mean,
we always try to be ahead of the curve, to grasp the technology and to lead the category. And come 1996-ish. That's when our first forays into online came, mostly as a marketing tool. There really wasn't anything that allowed us to put all of our cards onto a website per se, but basically we got our marketing out there. And it wasn't...
That's pretty much, you were a very strong impetus and encourager for us, our company, Beckett Publications, to kind of get into the 21st century, because it's one thing for us to do some hypothetical programs or databasing things that are good for us for pricing cards and cataloging cards, but the real test is in the marketplace. And you were visionary to say, if you could do this, I could take it and run with it.
I can't take all the credit for that. I got a phone call from your vice president, and Mark said, I have this idea, but before I pitch it to Jim, I want to make sure that you're on board. So I can't take all the credit. And of course, we were creating our own spreadsheets before that.
We didn't have this exact saying, but it's famous that Jerry Maguire showed me the money. But for me, when our guys had these great ideas, it wasn't show me the money. It was show me the customer. Show me somebody who's the customer, which is actually a Peter Drucker thing. So knowing who your customer is. And so Mark was brilliant in so many ways, but he also had been more of a coin collector.
Yeah.
So he wasn't and coins are, I think, way less complicated than cards.
Yes and no, because you have a foreign coin.
Okay. If you get into foreign, it could get very complicated.
It's like cards. It's got 8 to 10 grades of everything. It's different, but a lot of it's the same.
What in your personal journey? It has to be gratifying for your son Ryan to be here with you, and he's really emerging and coming into his own. He's not the same as you, but he's kind of taking a similar track, but he's bringing his own passions to it.
I view him as Rob 2.0. I think that you always want it to be a family business, and I wasn't sold on the fact that he really wanted it up until about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. And it's my exit strategy. I'm like, what happens if I drop dead and there's no one in the family that wants it? And then it becomes, what does it become? I mean, it's really hard to sell a business like mine. And the fact that he's come on board, but not only come on board, but really taken it as his own. And I told him 2 years ago, treat this like it's your own, and I'll guide you. But there's been a passing of the torch.
I've really seen the growth in his confidence just in the last year. But you mentioned that it's hard to sell a business. I don't think it'd be hard for you to sell your business. The harder thing is to run it. I mean, you have all this inventory, but a lot of it comes through you and your expertise. So there's always going to be this. You couldn't just have a corporate type Fortune 500 to somebody with a fresh MBA to come in and do this. It's you really need to understand the industry, don't you think?
I think it's even more than knowing the industry. It's having lived these products and knowing when they came out, knowing the difficulties, being able to recognize a really tough card from a really average card from a product 15 years ago.
Right.
And I've got this database in my mind that is instantaneous. I can recognize damn near anything.
Well, you're my inspiration. I mean, at the show, I go around, I'm really testing myself in that same way. When you're leafing through cards to recognize that to a person with less than 10,000 hours, such as we have, you're just going through cards. But when every 10th card is something that has something that's just unusual, and unusual to the point that it's the more difficult variation, and hence quite a bit more. And if you can't catch that, that's the real hobbyists generally get into it. I think.
Yeah, I think
either maybe just for their player, or the sets they collect, or the vintage years that they collect. But it's a hobby that can be really immersive, and there's actually. I can't imagine anybody that's immersed more than you have. And so it's been a delight working with you all these years, and even now having you as a sponsor and getting to get to know you and see your excellence and your expertise and your passion and drive firsthand. So thanks for sharing your story, Rob. We'll come back in a few days and talk some more. Thanks.
You got it.